Hi, my name's Spence and I'd like to talk to you about an interesting case study of using Scrum and ScrumatScale for the business of regulation. This is not product development. This is an actual business that just makes decisions. It's the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission. Their job is to protect consumers, promote good business and enhance the reputation of Gibraltar as a financial services centre. There's about 90 people organised into 4 directorates, but only one small team, about 4 of them, would be considered any form of product development. They're in the business of legislation, of authorising businesses and things like that. So how did they get into Agile? Well, they had big projects that they needed to do every so often. If you need new legislation, that's tough. Right? There's a lot of legislation, it's very complex and it needs to be integrated together. So they had a legislative reform programme. This is going to change the way that a lot of things are done in Gibraltar for financial services. 90 pieces of legislation consolidated into one primary piece of legislation that's more accessible, more friendly to business and easier to regulate. Now this is difficult because you've got to get ministers to agree. This isn't like ticking off stories in a product backlog. This is a period of negotiation. These are tough. And they were having problems. As you can see from the quote from the Director of Legal Enforcement and Policy, traditional approaches weren't working. These projects would seem to go off into a huge black hole for a long time. But using Scrum, they got a huge breakthrough. Suddenly they were getting fast feedback. They could see that they could get better forecasts and they could see that things were moving and it was going great. Everyone was happy about it. The ministers are happy with the way things are going. And as Peter says in his quote, when they started, he feared that they would never be able to finish this. So this started a big go. Well, let's go agile. We should be more agile. But we don't do projects. We regulate. Less than 20% of their work is actually even that kind of legislation. Most of it is actually responding to requests for transporting or to set up new businesses. Most of the gambling in Europe is run out of Gibraltar, so it has to be highly regulated. So can you do agile regulation? So we got everybody together and looked at the basics, the culture, the manifesto, the principles, and found that with only a few tweaks, it became the culture that they wanted. And interestingly, it's about collaboration, not enforcing the rules. Most people actually want to be compliant. They need help to be compliant. So you've got to take a much more agile approach. But their key problems were the squeeze on projects. There's a lot going on. Brexit could cause a big, huge tidal wave of work. They need to be adaptable and flexible to the new legislation. They found that the teams were changing too much. People were being pulled from hither to yon to work on projects. They needed to grow. They wanted to have a more responsive culture, and they're not building anything. But by working through with the teams, letting them take some more ownership, they agreed, yes, agile would be the best way to go. But you need to be careful when you go agile. A lot of scaling going on at the moment should be descaling. People are teaching wasteful parts of organisations how to be more agile and lean and keep themselves going. This needed a whole new kind of organisation because we wanted high-performing teams, and high-performing teams need to be self-organising. They need to be stable. They need to be able to do, I would say, at least 70, if not 80% of their backlog items by themselves, removing those dependencies. They need to break out of line management structures. And this was one of our big takeaways. We don't just want self-organising teams, we want a self-organising organisation. And you can't have a self-organising organisation if you have to ask permission to go from one team to another. But you do have to look after people. Organisations have a duty of care, so we're moving towards professions. Right, away from production lines to more self-organising teams and towards professions with head of professions, and those heads of professions may well be in the teams because they are head of profession because they love their job, they know most about it, not because they want to manage people. So that was one of the big things. And obviously, this is more cultural change. This isn't about authorising more businesses, because that's not a good thing if they're not the right businesses. But there is a world-class reputation to be preserved. We do need faster decision-making, but not removing impediments, but making the decisions about whether this is a suitable person to have a licence for insurance, whether this are suitable people to run a gambling company. And we need less escalations. And by escalations, we don't mean, oh, I've got a bad problem, the build server's down. We mean the minister's upset because this company's hitting the front pages. The country's upset because this business is going out. Those are the kind of escalations. So we have a roadmap to get all the directorates up and running by the end of the year. And it's cultural change. So we need to measure the culture. We've already got the operational measures. So we have a cultural barometer. This is something that has been developed to show the behaviours they're looking for. Courage, motivation, value delivery. And this is all measurable and rolls up into a night. You can almost see the weather on there. If you have bad culture, there are storms ahead. So it rolls up across the organisation. The happiness index is a great leading indicator of future success. So we want to make sure that. Now we can do more decisions, but are they the right decisions? So how confident are we that we're making the right decisions? You cannot delegate some of these decisions. You have to have a certain level of approval to be able to sign off on businesses. So are we making the right decisions? And the main thing, are we freeing up more time? More time to make the change. That becomes important. So we're getting all that set up and decided the best place to start is at the top. Lead by example, symbolic leadership. Leaders should drink their own champagne. And this is a true executive action team in that it is the executive. These are the people who report directly to the board. And they're going to eat their own dog food, the inevitable pun there. But they're using Scrum. They are one of the first teams to go Scrum. They have a chief product owner who is actually the CEO of the organisation. They have an overall Scrum Master who's going to be helping set up all the other teams and is Scrum Master for this team. There's an organisational backlog that includes all these change initiatives. That includes the Agile transformation, because Agile is just part of many aspects of cultural change going on and doesn't really deserve this special status. It's another initiative. All of the initiatives will have their transformation backlogs. All of the initiatives will be run in an Agile fashion, and the Agile transformation will be part of that. But on the other hand, on the right-hand side, we have what we call the action backlog. Being an action team, we thought the best name for the backlog would be the action backlog. This is where impediments internally will end up. This is where decisions will get escalated. But it's more than just that. This is where stuff from ministers comes in. This is where failing companies will suddenly register. It's an action backlog because it can't wait. It can't be prioritised against the initiatives. Action is required now. It's required today, and it might require everyone to down tools. They did have some issues separating this from their actual team backlog. Things like writing the board minutes, doing reviews for people, all the other stuff. So they have their team backlog and they have a sprint backlog. They have daily stand-ups as well as scaled daily stand-ups. And they're running like a Scrum team and they love it. We thought they wouldn't do daily stand-ups, but they love it. And they've set an example. So what have we learnt? We've learned that leading from the front leads to success. The most agile people should be your executives. If they're agile, it sets the standard for everyone else. If they're going to start letting go, that's going to be great. When you're coaching these people, it's very different because they don't need empowerment. They've got all the power. They need advice and help. Now, this isn't software development, right? And one of the things you've got to get over is the buzzword bingo. I've had to learn to explain Agile to people with no software development background. It's all about high-performing teams. It's about collaboration. It's about empowerment, about the culture. And you have to let go of some of those buzzwords. We still talk about Scrum and Scrum Masters, but the people who run a directorate on the facilitation side still struggle to think of themselves as a Scrum Master because they're head of a directorate. top-down does work. It sets the standard if they become agile. If you can see them doing daily stand-ups, you can go and look at their team backlog and their sprint board. Right? And that's visible to the whole company. And this is great. You can look at the initiatives and the agile ones in there along with the other stuff. Speed of decision-making. I know we like to call it decision-making latency within here, but within their organisation, that would just be more of the buzzword bingo. It's about the speed, making the right decisions in a timely fashion. Not necessarily faster, but with that timeliness. That's important. And impediment removal, including those organisational impediments that you get from your hierarchical structures. And this is all about culture. This is a big cultural change, and it impacts on all the other initiatives that are going on. There's even redesigning the office because they need to have room for more people. And they're not having hot desks because hot desks don't encourage agile team working. You need team units, you need quiet pods. So it's permeating everything that they're doing, including their strategy. So their aim is to be flexible, responsive, highly adaptive, whilst ensuring stability. And key to that is becoming more agile. And that's published in their strategic plan. It's all over their reports for the last year or so.